Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Initialization and you're watching Techie Programmer. So today in this video we are going to learn about Python's classes and objects. So basically object-oriented programming in Python. So let's get started. Let me just move on to my PyCharm. So this is the notes. We will just add the code to this, and I will be uploading the link as usual in my Git repository. So the link is in the description. Just go and check out. And today we are going to discuss about Python classes and objectives. And the class is like an object constructor or a blueprint for creating objects. So we'll understand how to create a class, how to create an object, what is init function, object methods, self parameter, modify object properties, add object properties, delete properties, delete objects, and the pass statement. So let's start with creating a class. In order to create a class, what we do is we have a keyword that is class, class. You can just see the color changes to orange, and then we just name the class. That is, for example, if I just name my class as my class, it doesn't have take a parenthesis there. You can just go without a parenthesis. Coming down, just you need to write, for example, if you want a variable to be x equals to 10. I'll just show you this example. Just reformat this file. Okay, and let me just run. So here you can see it runs successfully without errors. So now we have created a class. So now we need to create an object using this class. So object is something like creating a clone of this, or a blueprint. This is a blueprint and we just make a object out of it. So let me just name my object as O, and let me just call my class. So, okay, then if I say print O dot x, then it should print 10. So let me just show you. So you can see it prints 10. So basically what is happening here is now my class, whatever, we have created a class, and then we are creating an object O out of it, and then we have a variable x inside a class, and we can access that using a period operator here. So accessing using period. So O comma O dot x will access this parameter. So this is how we create a class, and this is how we create an object. So now let us move on to init function. So let me just copy paste the code here so that we do not lose a lot of time. Yeah, this is an example here. So let me just explain you what happens here and what is init function and how does it work. Let me just reformat my file. So basically what happens here is I have created a class called my new class. Let me just rename it to person. So what it does, it takes two parameters. One is the name and second one is the last name. So let me just take this as a parameter right now. And then what we do is here we define a init function, which stands for initialization. So what happens is whenever we call or create an object using, like here we are creating an object called p, and whenever we create an object, then what happens is this is the code or the function that runs whenever we create an object out of it. So what happens here basically is whenever I say I'm creating an object, and then I need to pass the arguments that are associated with the init function. So for example, here I have a name and the last name. So what I need to do is here I need to pass a name and a last name. So talking about the self parameter, we will talk about it in this section here, the self parameter. For now, just think that init is kind of a main function in a class, so something like that. So initialization. So what happens here is we initialize the values or the whatever we want to initialize here. So whenever we call a class, then the properties of the initialize are done and then assigned, something like that. Then you can just access the parameters, or access the variables out of that. Here you can see, as we did here, we can just do the same here, that is using a period operator. So print p dot name prints whatever the name argument we have passed, that is Techie. And when it comes to the here, like print p dot last name, then it just prints programmer. So after running the file, you can see here you get an output techie and then a programmer, just because it has been printed on the different line. So this is what you get as an output. So this is how a init function works. So what we basically do is just make sure you pass a self parameter as a first argument, then this first argument is a self, and then you just pass name, just pass your next arguments here. Then what happens here is whenever you are using the variables, these variables inside the class, then you need to create a self dot name. For example, if you are going to use the name, then you just need to write as self dot name equals to this name. So whenever you want to use this particular variable, which is like name, then you shouldn't call it as directly as name, but you can use it as self dot name. So I will just show you how you can do that here in the object methods. So in the object methods, what we are going to do is adding, like let me just copy paste this itself. So controls C. So what we're going to do here is let us define a new function. It's called as printing. So here you can see what we need to do is whenever you create an like new function in a class, then you just try to write define, then your class name, your function name, then the self parameter, then you can close, or if you want to pass any additional arguments, you can just pass it here, then followed by a colon, then hit down. And if I want to like say print name is self, if I want to use, if I want to print the name, then I need to use it as self dot name. And then if I want to print a space, let me just do this, then print, let me say self dot last name. So this is how the code looks for object methods. So basically what happens here is whenever I create an object, then the initialization function runs. So the values are now initialized, and then we can use these values inside the functions that are defined in the class, this particular class. So let me just create an object here for p1, that is person1, who's, let me just take person joy, Dan. Okay, so now we have created an object. So let me just try accessing this. So if I want to run this here, this, so what we do is let me just say print, no, not print, I can just directly call it because already it consists of print statement here. So let me just say p1, I can access the functions using a dot operator, that is dot, then say printing, and as it is a function, you need to make sure you call it with a parenthesis. Let me just run this, and here you can say the name is Jordan, so something like that. So this is how object methods work. That is, I've created an object here, and in the class this is how we can define other functions, because basically just creating an initialize function doesn't make sense, so we need to have additional functionalities in the class. So this is how we can create a initialization, something kind of main kind of thing that is executed as soon as we create an object, and this is kind of whenever we call the function, the certain tasks takes place. Then talking about the self parameters, you can just see here we have used self here, here. Self is basically a parameter that we need to pass. That is, for example, I'm creating an object p1 here. So what happens here is, here you can see whenever I'm calling, like accessing or just telling to do something on my object, so you can see I said like p1 dot printing. So this is p1 is something like self, so it just acts like this. So whenever I say like for example, if I created object p1 and I want to print name, then what I would do is I would say p1.name. So you can see the self is like p1 here. So whenever I say p2, so self act as p2. So this is basically, it's not a hard and fast rule that you need to use it as a self itself, but you can use it anything, but you need to make sure you use it the same to all. And this is a basic practice for all other coders that they use self, so it's kind of a standard. So you can just glue with a standard, or what you can do is you can just change self to my silly object, whatever you can just name it. So this is how it works. So this is what self parameter is. Then we'll talk about the modifying the object properties. So modifying the object properties is just like manipulating the variables that we do usually in the Python. So for example, if I have a is equals to 10 and if I want to set it to 20, so what I will do is a is equals to 20. So something similar operation we are doing here. For example, if I have an object called p1 and if it has a name, so if I just try to print the name, it would be JOE. But if I would like to change it, then what I can do is, let me just assign it to called Ryan. So something like this. So now what happens is the value for p1.name is been updated here. Then talking about the delete object properties, if you want to delete this property, for example p1.name is equals to Ryan, and if you want to delete this, what you can do is just say delete, then whatever you want to delete. If I want to delete this, so I will just say that delete this, I mean p1.name, so it just deletes that. And then this is a property, so we are just deleting the property here. And if I want to delete the whole object, so what I will do is if I just say delete define, del stands for delete, del, then the object name that you want to delete. So this is how we delete the object. This is the object properties, modification of object properties. Then coming to the pass statement, we have discussed a lot about this pass statement. It does nothing, it just silences the error. So if I want to say, if I want to create a class and I'm not sure what to write in that, what I'll do is my stupid class with no idea. So what I'll do is I will just go down and just pass this. So what happens here is now this just runs without an error. That's it. So let me just recap. We have created a class here, then we created an object and we tried to access this x using a period operator. Then we talked about the underscore init operation. So what it takes is self, then your additional parameters that you need to pass along on the reference to the class name. Then you just write class name, then you can pass the parameters that you are going to initialize. So you can just access again those parameters using this dot operation. Then talking about object methods, that is how to create and add functions in the class. So this is how it works. Then modifying the object properties, I'll just here the self parameter is just kind of like this, as I explained. This is p1.name equals to name, so something like that. You can just name this anything, so instead of like this is something that refers everywhere. Then I hope you understand self parameter. Then modifying the object properties, as we used to update the variable, we can just update our class objects. So in this is an example here. Then deleting object properties, you can just delete a property. For example, this is a name property, and you can delete it using delete p1.name. Then deleting objects, you can just completely delete an object by saying delete the object name. And then the pass statement, just to silence the error so that you can just run the rest of the code and then come back to your class. If you have made up to the end, make sure you like, share and subscribe. And that's it for today, and see you in the next video.